everybody. Welcome to the Perform Happy podcast. I have like a big star on the podcast today. We have four-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, sports TV producer who has worked for all the major sport networks. She has covered the most high-profile events, including 5 Olympics, NBA profiles, and the part that is really why she's here is she's a mother of 3 daughters who all love to play sports. And she has founded I Love to Watch You Play, which is all in service of helping parents stop screwing up their beloved children in sports. Asia Mape, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So would you just give us a little background on I Love to Watch You Play, kind of the significance of that statement and how you were drawn to start your business?
Yes, of course. So as you said, I was working in sports television for 20 plus years, and I loved it. I was traveling the world and I was on the fields and, in the stands and interviewing in the locker rooms and around all these great athletes and players and coaches and experts like yourself. Um, at some point, I started having my kids, and I had 3 girls. They're all kind of very close in age, and they were getting into youth sports. And I was trying to kind of get out of sports television and all the travel. And a friend who I worked with, she was an on air talent. She said she had kids in sports too. She's like, this is getting like pretty crazy. She said, I feel like there's a need. And at that point, there really wasn't much going on. This was in 2015 as far as social media accounts or websites dedicated to this topic. And she said, I think we need to create something to help support youth sports parents. And at first, we did it kind of just as a passion project, and something we kind of did on the side. And we were both working other jobs. But eventually, my kids were young and I wanted to be with them more than not be with them. And so we kind of transitioned, and I took over the website from her. And to answer your question about I'd love to watch you play, which isn't that just the most perfect saying ever,
Mhm.
right? There's nothing else that needs to be said. We heard it from a TED Talk, a guy named John O'Sullivan. He's big in the soccer world. And he had used it in the TED Talk. And I'm telling you, Rebecca, it's kind of silly. For the longest time, I thought he came up with the saying or the phrase, but it's really from Bruce Brown in Proactive Coaching, who I've since connected with, and I'm going to have him on my podcast. But he was talking to like a young athlete who he was a coach at that time, I think, and he was just having a conversation with her. And she said that's all she really wanted to hear someone say. And it just kind of spread like wildfire. And I see it and I hear it everywhere. And I have no ownership over the phrase. It is good for every single parent, every single person to use out there, and we want them to. And we're just happy to sort of bring that phrase to life through our work on the website.
Great. Great. Yeah. And there was also a long-term study, right, by a couple of these coaches who would ask the kids themselves, what do you want to hear from your parents
Well, that's
after you
so I
play?
got to the bottom of that. Yes, they studied it. This is out of Bruce's mouth himself. We had a long conversation. He said, yes, that they did study it, but this was like one particular girl who may have been involved in that study, who was a player, or I thought it was a player of his, but it might have been involved in that study, who she kind of really said the phrase and it stuck. And it's all from this same proactive coaching and Bruce Brown.
Well, that girl. Okay, she's the
I
famous
know.
one then.
Where
She
is she?
pioneered the
I know.
phrase.
We got to get her on.
Yeah. Well, and it is so interesting to actually hear from the mouths of the athletes what they want from their parents. And I actually did a little, very small sample size where I took a bunch of teenage swimmers and gymnasts and gave them each a note card and basically said, what do you want your parents to do? And what do you want them to stop doing? And I compiled all that information and it was like, okay, so before a meet, they want you to feed them and be normal. Like that was basically what they said that they want. And then during a meet, clap and pretend like you're having a good time. And then after the meet, don't ask me any questions unless I tell you to and
Oh
feed
my
me.
gosh. I
And
love
and say I
this.
love you and I love you, and pretend
Oh
like you
my
had a good
gosh.
time watching me. And so it was the tract with this that they don't want you to say, I
No,
have a couple of tips for you. They don't
no,
want you
they do
yelling
not.
from the sidelines.
They really don't. I love that. And you know what? It's funny. It really just made me chuckle because my 16-year-old is constantly saying, I just don't want anyone to be weird. That's as you said, be normal. Like it's the same. She's so anti someone acting weird, which sort of is the same thing. And that really makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, look, and I say this to a lot of the parents that I work with, and I write about this a lot. After the game, okay, they've done the action that you're going to want to talk to them about. They've probably even said something to their teammate on the field or on the bench, like, oh, I can't believe I did that, or I need to do this. The coach may have even pulled them to the side and talked about the game, about their individual play. Then they've even had their post game talk about it. By the time they get to us, they're over it. They don't want to talk about it. They've processed it in a lot of different ways. And it's really about us, right? We are feeling that we have either some wisdom to impart or we want them to think about something. And it's all about us. And I think I love even just what you said about you asked them what they wanted, because that's really the simplest, most important key to everything, which is ask them what they want, period.
Yes. Okay, but then you think about, I saw one of your social media posts was you talking about, oh my gosh, I had to sit next to this dad who screamed at his kid the entire game. I mean, if that dad were to pause and go, kiddo, how can I support you? They're definitely not going to say, please scream at me for 1 hour, telling me everything I ever do wrong. Um, I wonder why it is so common that parents are contributing so much, like from the sidelines or in the car. Do you have any insight into why we feel the need to participate so much in our kids' sports?
Well, I do have a lot of sort of anecdotal and personal experience in just working on the website for so long. And first off, right, if you just look at sports in general, think about what they do to people when their child is not even playing, right? So, we're 49ers fans, we're Arsenal fans, whatever. We crowd around, we're watching. It's so exciting, we're intense. We can be in bad moods. My partner Dave, if Arsenal loses, oh my God, forget about it. It's like it brings out the best and the worst of people. And that's without your child even playing. And then you add into that mix something that it either came from you or that you've raised in love and, have so much hope and expectations and feelings and emotion. And that like my daughter, has been every day going tonight and praying she'll grow an inch because she wants to play outside hitter instead of libero or whatever it is. You know all this background. And so then you go and you put them out there. And that's even just like one small part of it, right? That's just like the sort of emotionality that we bring to sports and knowing our kids. But then you add to that whole mix the return on investment. Okay, we've just driven 2 hours to wherever for this game, and now my kid's not getting into the game. Or we, spent, we bought that bat and that backyard hitting set for $1,000, and now he's not performing. Or, whatever. There's so much about that return on investment that we're hoping for or expecting, and then it's like the FOMO. It's well, we're never going to make it to that next level. And then she's not going to make varsity, and then she's never going to make it to college. And Susie next door, she's already on that team, but if she's not going to be able to hit the ball right now, or she doesn't make these baskets, or she's constantly injured and on the bench, it's those kind of thoughts that go through our heads when we're sitting there watching, when all they want, all they need, all we're really supposed to be doing, like your own research showed, is giving them food and cheering for them and not acting strange. Like that's it.
Yes. I mean, as you're going through that list of things, I mean, that's classically so many parents are, if she doesn't get to this level, then she can't go to that level, then she can't go to there, and then she can't reach her dreams. And then what are we spending $1,000 a month on? Why are we
Exactly.
doing this? Where I look at that and go, that is exactly the breeding ground for fear, anxiety, mental blocks, depression. I
Everything.
mean, that high stress, high pressure outcome focus from a mental health standpoint is the last thing you want to be doing. But yet we are invested. So how what are your tips on for that parent who's identifying with this a bit? How do you start to, come back to not weird?
Yeah. Well, it takes the desire to. And sadly, I think a lot of the time, it's not till we've gone through it with one of our kids that we can really see it. So I think, like, even that dad that I was next to at the volleyball match, I bet you he would pass a lie detector test saying he thinks what he's doing is helpful for his child. Well, he needs to know. He's got to be tough. He doesn't understand this. I'm just helping, right? Like, there's a part of parents, I think most parents want to do what's right. We want to help them. We have great intentions. We just get lost. We don't understand. We get lost, or we get caught up in all these things. And I think the way that parents can really sort of change this, get back to the middle, um, is understanding the facts around it, right? So if you want your child, or if your child, it should always start with what your child wants. And I think a lot of us lose sight of that. If your child has big dreams and big expectations and you're trying to help them achieve those goals, you have to understand overuse. You have to understand pressure versus support. You have to understand single sport specialization, that it all does not lead to success. And so really what the work that I do, having really been sort of around this support and all this, it seems like, oh, kumbaya stuff. It's not. It's actually to help them be successful is a huge part of my mission statement. And they're not going to be successful. They're going to burn out. They're not going to love their sport. They're going to be doing it for you, not for them. Their bodies are going to be broken down. I was just talking to the Pepperdine women's soccer coach. He said, and I hear this all the time from coaches, they're coming in burnt out and their bodies are breaking down. They are increasing their number of student athletes that they take every year in the last few years because the kids come in broken. We're creating these 15 and 16-year-old super athletes, and they're peaking too early because of all the early sports specialization and the 10,000-hour rule that everyone, Malcolm Gladwell, sort of set into motion, and all the other things that we've been talking about today. But I think to get back to the original question, educate yourself about how a lot of that stuff is actually going to end up harmful. Yes, you might have a really good 10-year-old, 11-year-old because you've been doing the extra trainings and you've been on the top team and this, that, and the other. But that is no indicator of how they're actually going to be as an athlete after puberty. And B, you're going to burn them out and they're going to hate the sport. And so educate yourself on that. Remember the real reasons that we want our kids to play sports. And it can't be about all that other stuff. It just can't. If you have, if you took the time every day to sort of, before you go to the game, sit back and think, okay, whether they make the winning basket, don't get in the game, do this, do that, they're learning, they're growing, they're learning character, they're learning how to win gracefully, lose gracefully, they're learning how to be led, how to lead, all these things. And if you can kind of put that at, your center point before you're ever, and this is something you have to like remind yourself to do all the time. I'm still constantly getting myself tight and in a ball. And then I have to like, okay, because it's our natural inclination. So like, remember the reasons why we're doing it, and then do some real smart, like mindfulness work that you can, whether it's like a band, I have a band, I love to watch you play when I don't have it sitting here, that you can snap, that, put some things into place so that you can actually catch yourself while you're there. There's this thing called come to your senses, where, if you're sitting on the bleachers and your daughter is not put in the game and you thought she was going to be playing and she's not, and okay, you feel your feet on the bleacher. Okay, you feel your back on the hardwood. You smell the hot dogs from the hot dog stand. You start to like do some mindfulness work, and that one is called Come to Your Senses, and I love it. And it brings you to the present moment so that you don't react and respond. Because I don't know that we're changing youth sports immediately or anytime in the near future. In fact, it seems like it's only going to be more and more pressure packed because of NIL and all these other new changes. So learning how you can do what's right to be the best self for your parent, to be the best person for your child, I mean, not your parent, is what you need to do. And that's different, a little different for everybody, but you have to do the work. And when you screw up, because you will, you have to own it and apologize and keep practicing and keep trying because it is that important to get it right.
Yes. And I always think about, if you invest whatever, $1,000 a month over 12 months and you put all this stuff in and all your time and all of this, and then your kid comes out with a lifetime of physical pain, emotional pain, psychological issues. I mean, maladaptive perfectionism. Will it have been worth it? I don't think so. Yeah, maybe she won. Maybe she even went D1 and then was horribly abused by her college coach. It's like, at what cost are you creating
Yeah.
the outcomes that you think you want? And then also, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I ask kids, when you first fell in love with your sport, think back to that time, and they're always like 6 or 7, and the swimmer's just like swimming in the ocean, or the gymnast is just jumping on her parents' bed, or they're just like can't stop doing flips in the living room, and they love it. And I'm like, so when you were 6, it was about getting a 9.5 and going to Oklahoma, right? And they're like, no, I just loved to do it. And so parents, it's not about getting a 9.5 and qualifying for state. And it's like, she just likes to swim. She just likes to flip. Can that
Yeah.
be enough?
Yeah.
And at
It
what
should
point is
be.
that no longer enough?
I know. I don't know what's going on in this society, but it's like not, and that's, have you heard that? Did we talk about this on my podcast, that Jennifer Brenny Wallace book, Never Enough?
No, but I've been reading about it and it's incredible.
You
Yeah,
have
I
to
would
get
love
it.
for you to give us a little context on that.
Well, I think it's going to be very impactful for the work you do and for the sports, particularly that you work in. Um, but it's just exactly kind of nailing down why we can't seem to be like accepting of our kids unless they're the star or the 4.5. And I think what I took away that was really interesting and helpful is that we are okay with that. Okay, if you ask any parent, like, will you like not love them if they have a 3.5 instead of course not. That's insane. But all of our outward things that we're saying and doing are sending that message that that's what they have to get. And you can even say to your kid, "I love you no matter what." But that's one time you say that, but the 10 actions that you're doing, it's not adding up. And kids don't, it doesn't hit the same with kids like it would with a grown-up. It just doesn't. So one time you say something about you're not going to get into Princeton like your brother did or whatever, and you might just be saying that in passing, that hits so deep and so hard that 20,000, I don't care where you go to colleges, aren't even going to make up for that. And that's like being kind. I think most people are actually saying the other way, the message the other way, that yeah, you have to get in here, you have to get this. And even though they would still love them if they didn't, but we're not like making that the priority in how we talk to them and what we stress to them and when they walk in the door, what we say to them. And so they're internalizing that I don't matter, what I do matters. And she so eloquently like writes about it, shares stories, real stories about it, tons of research about it, and that gives real solutions about it too. I can't recommend that book enough.
Great. One more time, the author in the book.
Jennifer Brenny Wallace, Never Enough.
Okay. Yeah, check that one out for
Never
sure. And she
enough.
talks also about like toxic high achieving too.
That's what it's all the same.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's all that, it's all tied into there. And I had a woman write a really sort of vulnerable piece for me. She had had a dad. She works in sports. She loves sports, but her father was very overbearing and full of pressure. And she titled her blog piece, Good Job, But.
Oof.
And this also really hit with me. And I've been really working on that because I was really guilty of that. You did a great job, but next time make sure you whatever. And I think her dad was a little more over the top about it. But even if you're not over the top of it, I think the kids feel like they are just, it goes back to that book. They're never enough. You did good, but it's like they're exhausted trying to please us, trying to reach these unreachable goals to get to where? To what? Like to what end? It's just it's crazy. I have so many kids in our circle. They're taking college classes in the summer, they're high school kids, they're doing, and sometimes the moms and I would get together, they're all in 5 APs and this, and I'm like, why? Like, why are you ruining her summer to do what? Oh, well, then she'll have those credits going into college. And to do what? Like, does she need, like, they're not financially, in trouble or anything. It's not like they should need to graduate in 2 years. I'm like, so are you trying to have her graduate early from college? No. Well, then what? Like, why are we doing all of this? What is the end game besides burning them out in the interim, making them like causing friction between you and them because you're having to like force this down their throats, having them like completely spend every waking minute thinking about things they need to accomplish instead of just being kids, having fun, enjoying their lives and I don't know, helping out and volunteering and doing stuff that actually matters.
Yeah, taking initiatives, being creative. I mean, I noticed that
Yeah,
when I allow some space into my kids' schedules, they get creative.
yeah,
I mean, it's so hard to come up with great ideas when you are just checking boxes all day.
yeah, that is so true. And
Yeah.
to sort of to that point, to bring that to sports too, there's a big movement around this free play because what we're seeing too is a lot of athletes, they go through the system where they're in these really high-end club teams and various sports that are very, very managed by adults, telling them constantly what to do. And then they're disciplined, but they're not creative. They can't create anything on their own. They're not great players because they've never been able to just go out and play. They're like missing a key piece to all of that, which is creativity when you're in the park or you're in your backyard and you're making up moves and you're making up like all kinds of different plays in your head and doing it because they're always being managed by adults.
So, one thing I would love to talk about is the toxic sport parent. Um, there's always one on every team, that hyper competitive, my kid is the best, that just can really suck the life out of a team. And I'm curious if you have any tips for the people who have to sit next to her in the bleachers or, how to sort of like bring the positive change into the observation room at the gym.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one for a parent to do, right? Because, we're all kind of there together watching these games. And, as soon as you start sort of calling someone out, I don't know that that will help their child, or help, I don't know. Look, I deal with this stuff too, and I don't know what the right thing is in this situation because it can be really, really tricky. I think hopefully a coach would get involved, and I do think that parents need to have more comfort going to coaches for things. I think they want us to. I think it's hard because you don't want to um, either make your kid get you know suffer any consequences from it, but I do think that saying something, speaking up, always trying to be positive yourself. I talk about this a lot, and I do think that when the team in general is positive and you can start that positivity all by yourself, you really can. I think it allows a lot less room for people like that. They start to feel, they can see the writing on the wall. They can tell when there's no one else saying anything bad or negative. I also wouldn't allow it to happen if she's directly talking about someone on the team, or if there's someone, like I've said things a few times when people are yelling things at the other team or the refs, and you can say it with kindness, but those people, I don't mean to say those people, but they're probably dealing with stuff in their own lives, and there's something that is some needs being unmet or some triggers that are being activated. And I think having empathy and sort of talking to them, and even maybe pulling them to the side, and just saying, hey, this makes me feel bad when you yell, and you're like screaming at my kid because she's not passing the ball, or you're yelling at your kid, whatever. It just creates an environment that feels bad, and our kids hear that. And it'd be great to be positive. I think we're so afraid to talk, and sometimes I am too, because you're not sure if it's going to bring about the result that you want. But I do think in general, when you go to someone in a situation like that, or any situation, with an open heart and an open mind, and not a lot of judgment, but a lot of empathy, and like maybe it's even, hey, I mean, I'm kind of thinking it through as I'm saying it, but it's like, hey, I've noticed that you've been like screaming a lot, and I just want to check in. Like, are you okay? Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do? And maybe sort of start the conversation from that side of it. Because again, I do think that most parents are trying to do what's right for their kid, and do think that they are helping in some sort of way, or at least that it's not as bad as it is to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love your concept of positive gossip. I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
genius. Would you give a little tutorial on how to kind of be that positive infusion on your team?
Yes, I love that too. I just heard that somewhere else for a Michael Gervais interview, and I just resonated so much. Just flipping the script, right? Taking something that everyone knows about and talks about and does, which is gossip, and creates such a toxic environment, and flipping that script. And instead of like, whispering about the bad stuff, you whisper about the good stuff, and you support each other, and you like share the positive things. And instead of all this FOMO, and, oh, yeah, you don't want to say anything good because then that's going to pump them up. And so, like, it's such nonsense, right? That scarcity mindset that so many people in youth sports have. They don't want to share their trainers. They don't want to share a good new bar that they like, that is good energy. It's like, we're all so tight and keeping it. It's like, instead, let that positivity flow, share, be open. And the more one person starts, you can do this on your own team and start something. And even, I do think it's important that you sort of name it, right? Like, yeah, I think we should all, like, let's start this positive. And then it's like in people's minds, and I think they can really sort of grasp onto the concept. But positive gossip is just that. It's sharing around really good information. For example, my volleyball coach at my daughter's high school was an All-American and at Pepperdine, and had the coolest video. And I'm like, I want everyone to see this video. Like, I want the kids to see it. I was telling her about it, and my daughter's like, no, people will think you're like, whatever. I haven't exactly decided what to do about it, but it's like, do you know that Julie was an All-American at Pepperdine? Like, just share the good. Like, everyone wants to always just talk about the bad, and creating a culture that is positive and healthy. We're all raising these kids together. And I think we forget about that sometimes. They're watching you just as much as they're watching me or hearing, and the coach. We're all part of this. And so together we need to create a good culture. It's not only on the coach, it's also on all of us parents.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. Like the idea of being like, I heard that you had a pretty good game yesterday. Or I heard that like
Yes.
you came up with this really great drill that my kid loved. Or I love whispering to like a new teacher, like a new coach, being like, my kid loves you. Like just she
Yes.
wouldn't let me tell you that, but like she's obsessed with you. Like just those little like whispers to people of like, She
Yes,
loved
spread the
that. She thought
love.
that was so cool. And I know from having been a coach, then I'd be like, oh my gosh, I love her too. I'm gonna give her special attention. It's like we just humans, we love positive and we want to reinforce
Yep.
it. So I
I
think
think
planting those little
yes.
seeds of truth as a rule is just such a great little
Yes, and
strategy.
with no agenda, no agenda. You're not trying, and I think that's probably why a lot of more people don't do some of these things, is because everyone always thinks someone's out for some sidebar reason, right? But I think you were kind of hitting at this, and coaches, they need positive like reinforcement and feedback more than almost anyone probably does.
Yeah.
And I think sending a little note after the game, my coach always says, thank you for replying to that email, because nobody replies to the emails. And now, of course, I'm going to do it every time. But like, yeah, you're in this sort of weird vacuum of like wall between coaches with the parents, and they're humans. It's like human nature to want to connect, have positive feedback. And I think if we just let all those like concerns about what it's going to look like to somebody else or what it may mean, if you think so, it's very simple. If you think something nice, you heard something nice, share it.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Like, yeah, I heard it on the grapevine that you are getting good at math. You know what I mean? Like in my sixth grade or my 6-year-old's class. Like, I
I
just
love
love to be
it.
like, I heard that this used to be a struggle for you, but I'm seeing that you are amazing at it. So how cool to watch you grow. Like, I
I
love
love
that
it.
kind of like little sprinkling in of feedback. Okay, so
Yes.
now one other topic that I think is really important for parents is the idea of quitting. And I know you have,
Yeah.
your water polo daughter, you
Yes.
may have felt like it wasn't the perfect way to have handled the
Yeah.
end of her
Oh,
career.
yeah.
Would you let us know a little bit about that and what you learned from it, from her quitting her
First
sport?
off, since writing that blog piece, I try not to use, sometimes you just have to because it's like the perfect word, but I try not to use the word quit because somebody
Mm.
really pointed that out at some point. Posted that article. It's such a negative connotation, quitting, right? I mean, because a kid has played something and wants to try something different or doesn't want to do that anymore does not make them a quitter, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a professional athlete doesn't quit, like they just retire, they whatever. But for a kid, they're quitters. We have so many
Mm.
kids quit and all this stuff around quitting. And that's sort of a real sidebar, but that is an important thing to think about. That so many the statistics are there 70% quit by age 13, but that quit word is really heavy. And a lot of 70%, let's say 40% of that 70 finds other things they like to do. That is not quitting. So I just do think that that's like an important thing to remember when we're talking about this subject. Um, and I would say my daughter retiring from water polo was completely appropriate, was complete. She had gotten everything she needed out of water polo. The problem was me
Mm.
and her father and those around who don't want her to quit or leave water polo because we're invested. We're at a school where she chose just for water polo. We saw her being able to play at a Division I college, all these things. And they're all about our thoughts about her and where we saw her and what we've put into it. And it's so crazy because looking back, um, it makes total sense. She was an artist. She would get back after 3-hour water polo practices and be too exhausted to do her art. She kept trying to hint it to us, but we were a sporty family. We both played Division I sports. We love sports. We worked in sports. So for her, there wasn't a lot of room or space to be anything but an athlete. And I think it all really goes back to that listening, letting them guide their journey. And, for all I know, she might have still played had we supported her in the way she needed to be supported, which is she needed breaks. She couldn't do the club high school grind. It was too much. There's 1 month off for water polo. And, we just weren't honoring what her little self was telling us. we just kept pushing our own agendas. And again, and I say this when I talk about parents, and I say I think we all have good intentions. I only had good intentions. I guarantee you, I thought I was doing what was right for her. I just didn't know. I didn't understand. And looking back, it caused a lot of problems, caused some anxiety in her, caused strain in our relationship, certainly caused her unhappiness for a year or more while we were kind of trying to work through this. And there are positive things, right? I think she got most of them before that last year that was so hard. But she even says, I just had a conversation with her the other day. She was home from college, and she was like, I think I have such a great work ethic. We were talking about it. She was working 2 jobs this summer. And she goes, I think a lot of that came from water polo and from the grind. And like, I see a lot of, even in art school, kids that like, they don't work as hard, or they're not sort of as invested. And she sees all those benefits that she got. But at a certain point, a kid who signs up for water polo in 8th grade and says they want to play in the Olympics might change their minds, right? That's, I think it's such a simple, basic thing, but we really get so caught up in it, so invested in it. All of our friends were on the water polo team. And so we just really need to step back, let it be their journey, listen to them, really listen without judgment, without sort of like that. I think I used to hear what she said and attribute it to laziness, or she just doesn't like, I had some negative thing. I wasn't really listening to her. And it makes me deeply sad still to this day that I caused that, year or more of a lot of real inner turmoil for her and for us. And I think really, I think owning that, if you're in a situation like this, if one of your parents is listening to this, I don't think it's that weird or crazy that this happened. I think a lot of parents go through this. And if you're in the middle of it or you're trying to figure it out, own it. And that's what I did. And I do, and I continue to do, and apologize for it and say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I didn't see you, and then move forward the best that you can. And it takes some time. There's been a lot of repair that we've been having to do around this subject matter. And so, I learned a lot through that. I learned a lot that's been good for the website, because I think it's helped me now sort of talk to these younger parents, because I have been through some stuff. Until you really go through some stuff yourself, it's hard to sort of advise on a lot of different things. So for me, it's been beneficial because I can help a lot of people hopefully avoid it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's such a great example of like a lot of kids get afraid that if they don't reach their big goal, their D1 goal, their whatever level, then it was a waste. Or what was it for? And I hear that so often where they're like, well, then it was a waste. But your daughter who retires her senior year, goes on to college doing something she loves, has all these amazing skills that she learned through the toughness of that sport. Was it a waste? Absolutely
Yeah.
not. And there's no possible explanation where I would see that that was a waste.
No,
And
exactly. Well, Rebecca, that's exactly what we've been saying. It's not about all these outcomes. It's about the process and what they're learning. And that's where I think parents start to get lost and, maybe guide their kids in the wrong direction around that stuff, because it really is what they're learning about themselves through the process of playing sports. It's not about a college scholarship. It's not about a return on the investment. It's not about making the first team. It's not about medals. It's not about, any of that. It's about putting yourself out there, trying new things, and learning all these great character building skills along the way.
yeah, and back to that idea of you're going to spend $1,000 a month on something and they come out the other end resilient,
Yeah.
compassionate, leaders, kind, wise. I mean, yes, take my money, like, yes,
Yeah,
I want my kids to be strong, independent women who know they can do hard things, who are
exactly.
creative and open-minded and can work well with others. Like, yes, that's what I want for my kids. And if sports can do that, amazing. If sports are not doing that, then something has to change from my perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Whether, it's usually the adults in their lives, right? The
Yeah.
coaches or the parents that are hindering that. that ability to
Absolutely.
get the good from sports. Sport is just an empty vessel. It's the adults and the people and the leagues and the people that are filling up those leagues and teams that, make it what it is. And so you're right. If they're not getting those positive things, then something has to change and something has to give for sure.
Yes. Ah, amazing. Well, Asia, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you about this. I know this is going to be really valuable for the moms and dads out there who are just trying to do our best, myself included. I'm filing things away for when I have teenagers. But thank you. How can people find you if they want to connect or ask questions or follow you?
Yeah, I mean, anyone can always email me anytime, Asia, ASIA, at I love to watch you play.com, all written out. And then the website is I love to watch you play.com. And I'm on all the socials. I think it's the I love to watch you play for Instagram. I love to watch you play for Facebook, and I'm on Twitter, and I have a newsletter and a new podcast that I am just slowly putting out that I had you on and you were
Yeah.
amazing on, that should be coming out soon. So yeah, the newsletter, the podcast, and then all those typical normal places.
Yes, it's incredible information. Definitely follow along. It's, as we just try to grow up while our kids grow up doing
Right?
sports, we need all the
Together.
help we can
Yes.
get. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.